Awesome. So I'm super excited to have John Coyle on our show today. John, he's just one of the most interesting people that I've met. So not only is he an Olympic silver medalist, but I learned about the concept of time in a different way and how you can design life experiences to maximize your experiential time. And I hope I'm getting this right, John, but while I'm thinking about it, I guess I'll let you kind of step in and welcome to the show and tell us about experiential time. I guess that's a good place to start.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for having me, Terry. And my fascination with time's been going on for decades, probably hinging on, I guess, my Olympic experience where, milliseconds determine the future trajectory of your life. Or as Seinfeld.
That's pretty heavy. That's a pretty deep thought, actually.
As Seinfeld puts it, gold, silver, bronze, never heard it.
That's great.
So what I realized later in life is that it's actually true for regular life as well. So a lot of the way we experience time hinges on small moments, not on long, laborious years and weeks and months. And that epiphany led me to start digging into the neuroscience. So just in quick summary for now, and I'm sure we'll get into it more later, time is constructed by our brains. So there's real time out there, clock time, but the way we experience time is anything but linear. And the Greeks are really smart, and they figured this out 2,000 years ago. So they had two words for time. They had chronos, which is clock time. That's the time we use ubiquitously in English. It's the only word, by the way, we have is time for time. The most used word in the English language, other than a, and the. But they had kairos, which is human time, the way we actually experience time, and they use that about 65% of the time. And that definition is when everything happens at once and the trajectory is reset. And that's what we're talking about. These kinds of experiential moments are the kinds of things that really manipulate our brain's reconstruction of time.
Well, this is a particularly fascinating conversation for my clients because, and look, as a financial advisor, it seems perhaps odd that I'm sitting here talking about experiential time, but I view my role as an advisor is to help improve the quality of my client's life, right? And so financial is just one part of it. And since most of my clients are over the age of 50, time is a limited resource, and it's probably the most valuable resources that they have. I mean, we've all heard that, and I think about what you're saying, because when I used to work for $5 an hour or $10 an hour, boy, that clock needle just moved awfully slow, didn't it?
Right.
And then when you get into different things, it moves so fast. And so it's fascinating to me. And I guess what I'd really love to pick your brain on is, for our clients who have a limited window of time left, what are some things they can do to maximize their, we'll call it experiential time, and make it last longer than what the years that they have feel like?
Yeah, great question. I just finished yesterday an article called "Time Poverty: Why you might be poor even if you are rich." And this could be true for some of your clients. A lot of people, I think, that are successful live in time poverty. And the time poverty I would define as having very limited supply of available unscheduled time. So there's a lot of people that let their schedules control their lives. And, time and money are fungible, right? The whole point of trading your time for money is so that at some point you start trading your money for time. But I think a lot of people get caught in that hedonic treadmill and don't start trading that resource that they've accumulated back for the very thing that it was built for in the first place. So, my broad encouragement to your clients would be to evaluate where they are in their financial and temporal lives and say, wait, is it time yet to start taking some of this financial asset and trading it back for more time? And I would guess for, the over 50 crowd, it's going to be a lot of them that should be, and probably few of them that are.
Yeah, it's a super interesting concept, and when you hear about people that are sort of at the end of their lives, they always talk about the things that they didn't do, not so much the things that they do. Right? That's pretty common knowledge. And you strike me as incredibly genuine about all of this. And I sense from a human standpoint that there was some kind of a deeply moving experience for you that caused you to take a step back and look at this and go, WTF, what am I doing? Right?
Yeah.
What was that for you? Or am I right?
No, you're right. And I was caught in a very, very dark time poverty spiral for a good decade. I worked in a Fortune 500 in a senior role, and my entire life was have-tos. I actually did the math. There was a period, my last 3 years in corporate America, I had 38.5 hours of meetings per week on average. So
I can't believe you made it that long.
Right? And that left, so that meant my day began basically when the workday was over, in terms of being able to actually do things and make things happen. And then you combine that with family and a child and sports and, all of that, there was zero me time. And so what happens is the brain, it's very lazy. So the memory writing process is a highly intensive activity. It's one of the most intense things the brain can do. And so it does so really only for two reasons. The brain writes memory from an evolutionary standpoint in order for you to procreate. And really, it wants you to always do this again or never do this again. So that's why you always remember the worst and best things, right? You don't remember the middling days. And so when I had an entire decade of middling days where everything was routine and the same and forced, I don't remember much of those years. Outside of like kids' birthdays and occasional vacation, those days just disappeared behind that sort of gridlock of the chess pieces of my schedule. And it was, in hindsight, miserable. I didn't know it was miserable at the time. But when I finally sort of woke up and quit and began working for myself and having my own schedule and having my own life, and, to steal a quote I heard from somebody recently, I would rather be homeless than work for somebody else again.
It's pretty remarkable. And so it reminds me in my own life, John, I went through a divorce, and I can tell you that I was so invested in trying to save the marriage that I didn't realize that I would be happier if I didn't.
Right.
And I was so scared. And, anyone who's ever been through this process knows it's brutal, it's humbling. It's a million different things, right? It's almost as, in some ways, I think it's worse than a death, because the other person that you cared about is still alive. They're not the same. You have to live through it for so long. I mean, it's brutal. And I look back and I realized once I got out of it, away from it, it wasn't just like the divorce is over and then you're done. It's the divorce is over. There's a healing process. You go, but once I got out of that, it's like, I didn't realize how messed up my life was until I got away from it. Right. And I could step and look at it almost from an observer's perspective. And so it sounds like in some ways that's the experience. And what I'm really curious from your standpoint about is, how did you make that financial leap? Right. Because I'm assuming that you probably had a great career, and I'm sure you did well, but you build a lifestyle and you're like, holy shit, this big income that I've been making is now gone. And I'm young, I'm healthy. Look, you're an Olympic athlete, so your life expectancy, unless you do something stupid, should be pretty good, right? And so that's an even longer time to have this money. And now the one thing that afforded you the lifestyle that you had is kind of gone. So how did you do that?
So it's so funny the way you brought this up, because the epiphanal moment I had was I was at the Sochi Olympics. And I was there for 24 days. And so I was away from my home situation for a long period of time.
Almost a month. I mean, that's a long time.
Yeah. And what I didn't realize was the same thing that you had experienced, which was I was in a very untenable relationship. It was a boiling frog situation. It got worse and worse over the years, and I was doing my damnedest to hold it together. But it was the 23rd day, and I'm walking across in front of the torch with one of my best friends. And I was telling him what was going on, and he's like, sounds to me like you're staying in this just for your daughter. And I said, well, of course. And he said, did it ever occur to you that you might be teaching her that it's okay to stay in an abusive relationship? And it was like, pow, like the top of my cranium just blew off. I hadn't ever thought of it that way. I was just programmed to fight the fight, to keep it together, to do the corporate job. So I quit it all. I mean, I got divorced and divorced my workplace all the same 2 days after I got back.
That is unbelievable. I mean, obviously, two things, right? As an Olympic athlete, you have a near beyond human ability to withstand pain, because what you have to do to train at that level, right? It's just brutal. And then beyond that, it's like, so you had the pain of enduring what it was like, but you also had to have the fortitude to say, screw it, because I can't live like this anymore. And actually, the guts that it takes to do that it takes more energy than it does to endure the pain to stay in it.
Yeah.
Especially all at once like that.
Yeah, it was a big, but a lot of, like the Goethe quote, like once I decided to move, the universe supported it. So the first night after I got back, I slept in a hotel, a Marriott. The next day I got a consulting gig where I was away for 4 days in a hotel. So I had a hotel for 4 more nights. And then we're driving back from Iowa where the gig was. And I literally have no idea where I'm going at this point. And the phone, actually it was a text, my phone buzzed, and it was one of my best friends who was down in Central America, and they were down there for 8 months. And he was like, hey, our renters moved out. Do you know anybody who'd want a home?
Come on.
Sit in our home for a couple of months. So I moved in that evening to their house and stayed there for 3 months with no rent. And that was the period during which I started building this business, but I had no income. And meanwhile, lawyer fees,
future ex-spouse and divorce expenses and all that stuff. Tony Robbins calls that leverage. If you want to affect the change, it's human nature to just endure, right? But you have to have leverage. And to me, it seems like the leverage for you was the aha moment when you realized that the more important thing was not you, was your daughter, and not teaching her, setting herself up for a potentially shitty life to go through and follow the same experience, right? And just live the same thing you did. That's leverage. That became the driving force behind at least the impetus for making the change. Of course, she had probably a bunch of other reasons too, but it's really fascinating. So now that you look back on that part of your life, right? Is it a blip, or does it seem like it was an eternity?
No, I mean, it was an eternity. This is the sort of contradictory nature of the way the brain constructs time. When things feel very slow, boring, and plodding in the present, they tend to disappear in memory because this brain is just struggling through something that it doesn't really care to remember. And a lot of times when things go what feels like really fast-paced in the present, those memories can be quite expansive. And so that's the trick, really, to investing your time wisely. We know where our money is, right? We don't put all of our money into a low risk portfolio because you're not going to get high returns, right? That's just the way it goes, right? In order to have some good returns in your portfolio, you have to have some up in the high risk category, right? Same as with our time, unfortunately. If you expect your future to be lengthy and long, full of memories, and you're all invested your time into low risk activities, it's not going to work. The brain is triggered and wakes up only when there's risk for it to say, never do that again or always do that again. That's what you've got to design into your life, is the kinds of adventures that trigger the brain to write down memories. And this is where international travel is nearly a panacea, right? It's unique, it's different, it's beautiful. There's always risk of something going wrong. Usually something does go wrong, right? But that's what triggers the brain to be awake and write those memories. Tomorrow I'm flying to Bora Bora. Stand by. So God knows how that's going to go.
Geez, let me think. Hopefully you'll somehow get a false positive while you're there on a COVID test.
Right, and just stay 2 weeks.
Indefinitely. It's one of the craziest vacations that we ever took, and it's kind of funny, is because this is the vacation that my whole family talks about. And it was a comedy of errors from one thing to another.
Right.
It started, I thought I made a reservation to rent a house on Mackinac Island. Okay, I don't know if you've ever been there, but Mackinac Island in Michigan is
I'm
phenomenal.
from Michigan. Yeah.
Okay, so turns out what I actually did was reserve. See, when I did the VRBO search, I searched for Mackinac Island, but like a good algorithm, if there's nothing on Mackinac Island, it just takes you to the next closest thing. Well, in this case, it happened to be a little place called Marquette Island. Well, Marquette Island, as you know, is in the Lachino Islands, and you can only get there by boat, and there's no ferry.
Right.
So after I paid for the house, I realized, wait a minute, this isn't Mackinac Island, right? So then I realized I don't have a boat. I ended up spending more money to rent a pontoon boat to get back and forth to the mainland than I did to actually rent the stupid house. And it was just a comedy of errors after that. But that's the one my whole family talks about. And there was risk. I mean, my daughter and I tried to take our pontoon boat down what would have been like a 45-minute boat ride at night with no lights, thinking that there were channel markers, which there weren't. So we ended up going back and sleeping in our cars the whole night. All 12 of us did this, right? So,
oh God.
Yeah, I mean, it was really one of the funniest things. But you know, I understand your point about how these things, right? So what I would like to know is, you know, how do you engineer risk? How do you trick your brain into that it's risk, but it's not life-threatening risk, right? Is there a way to do that?
So, you know, in the book that I'm working on, I talk about 6 key triggers to memory writing, to the brain writing. It's really 3 things. Writing memories that are deeply written and highly recallable. So sometimes the brain doesn't write memories. So if you commute to work on the same path every day and you find yourself in the parking garage and you don't know how you got there, that's because the brain basically said, oh, nothing new here, nothing to write down. And it didn't write anything down. And so I would argue you're actually dead. Like, if you don't have a memory of being alive for that period, are you alive? Not really, right? As a tree falls in the forest kind of thing. But the second is, you know, is it writing them? Is it writing down first? Is it writing them deeply? Is it just storing a lot of information? And that's good. But if it stores it away, some part of the brain where it's hard for you to reach without a good hypnotherapist, that's also kind of a wasted memory. So most importantly, it needs to be written down deeply and highly recallable. Now, this is where the brain is the relatively new understanding. But the hippocampus is the memory writer. It takes your short-term memory and writes it to long-term memory. It does about every 2 or 3 seconds, except if the amygdala, which it's next to it, awakes. The amygdala is a sentinel. It's looking for danger or excitement. So it's mostly quiescent, but when something's exciting or scary, it wakes up and it tells the hippocampus to write memories 10 to 20 times faster. So suddenly you're writing memories at a feverish rate, and they tend to be highly recallable because the amygdala wants the hippocampus to write highly recallable memories, so you don't do that again, or you always do that again. Then you've got another final layer, which is really fascinating. If you're in the flow state, if you're in your peak performance zone, if you're fully engaged in something that you're good at, then the flow state also causes a 5x increase in memory writing. So now you're writing 100 to 200 times more memories per second than in a quiescent, safe, boring state. So
that's remarkable.
Yeah. So what you want, here's the six triggers. You need some form of risk. This just means really just caring about the outcome of whatever you're doing. Okay. This is where people that try to take on new experiences like voice lessons or piano lessons or a triathlon or Toastmasters, usually those things don't have a lot of risk to them. I mean, you take a class, whatever. It's not like when you were a kid where you're going to cry over the outcome.
Right.
Right. So you have to be fully emotionally engaged in an activity. So the risk has to be real to some extent. It doesn't have to be killing you, but it needs to be real. So risk is a really important one. Uniqueness, which has a flavor of risk to it, but is it something different? Is it something new? Because the brain, again, is going to shut down if something is the same old, same old. Is it beautiful? Right? Is could be a vista, could be music, could be a conversation, what have you. Are you in the flow state? And by the way, flow state takes place a lot of places that people don't think about. Most people think about athletics, but if you get in a real good conversation, I would argue this is one of those, you get in the flow state because you're fully anchored to that conversation. So flow state could be conversation, selling, doing spreadsheets, singing.
Spreadsheets. Come on, that's a stretch, the spreadsheet part.
If you're a good spreadsheeter, right? If that's
okay, I don't want to know you if you are. I'm just saying.
So risk, uniqueness, beauty, flow state, physical intensity, not always required, and then emotional intensity, which is related to risk and uniqueness. If you stack all 6 of those, so if you can get all 6 of those at once, these are the kinds of moments there's a before and after.
Yeah.
Right? And they're usually moments, right? You said yes or you didn't. You asked the girl out or you didn't. You went in for the kiss or you didn't. You got off of that exit or you didn't. You avoided the crash or you didn't. Like, these things tend to happen in relatively short time frames, and they change your future trajectory. And so if you'd like, I'll tell you one. Actually, you probably know this story, but your audience doesn't. I'll tell you one that changed my entire life, and it happened in just a few seconds.
Our people will love to hear this.
So I've got a silver medal. I'm training 4 more years, which is a huge investment of time and energy and lack of money. And I'm going to be 30 for this next Olympics. And I failed to make the team.
You failed to make the team?
Yeah, I didn't even make the team.
Oh, wow. That had to be just brutal.
Oh, it was crushing. It was so humiliating that I got off the ice after my last race at the Olympic trials. I didn't even put on my skate guards because I knew I would never skate again. I walked across the concrete, grabbed my skate bag, walked outside to my car, crunching on the asphalt, took my skates off in the car. I drove to Arizona and had nothing to do with the sport for 8 years. Didn't watch it, didn't talk about it, nothing.
That's pretty powerful.
Then NBC called, which actually literally happened yesterday again. So I'll be the analyst for this coming games as well. But they called, asked me to be the analyst for the games back then. I couldn't say no to that. So there I was back at the Olympics with the parents and coaches and skaters. My job was to interview them to get the backstories to feed to the commentators, which will be my job here coming up in Beijing. And on the last night of the Olympics, the night before the gold medal round for my event, one of the parents pulled me aside and in a moment changed the entire trajectory of my life. And it was all 6 of these things, really. We started talking. He seemed very intense, very emotional. And he said, "John, I need to tell you something that's really important." So we started talking, and apparently my eyes wandered. So he grabbed the back of my head and he said, "I need you to listen." I was like, "Oh, okay." He was a school teacher, so used to dealing with ADD people. So then this is what he told me. He said, "I just want you to know that we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you." And I said, I don't know what you mean. He said, "You won't remember, but 8 years ago, after you won your silver medal, you brought it to a little reception in Bay City, Michigan. You put your medal around my son's neck, Alex. He was 11 years old at the time. And the next day he joined the Bay City Speed Skating Club. And tomorrow he's skating in the gold medal final." And
that's unbelievable.
Just like that, my entire worldview changed. Because for 8 years, I had believed in my heart of hearts that I was a one-timer first loser. Only won Olympics, second place. That's the way I identified as a human being.
How did you get to that place? I mean, that's such a, like, when you look at it now, you know that's such a ridiculous way to look at everything. How did you get stuck in that place?
It's super common. It's almost all elite athletes go through this, no matter how successful they are. Because if it's not 19 gold medals, it should have been 20, right? If it's not 2 Olympics, it should have been 3. If it's not, 2 medals, it should have been 4.
Yeah,
because we're wired, and all we think about is winning, winning, winning. So when you retire, you have no ground to stand on. You're there teetering in vertigo, not having any anchor to your life that used to be there for decades in my case. So when Al told me this, it was like, wait a minute. So even just one person had a trajectory change because of me. That somehow makes all of this okay. In fact, it makes it pretty great. In fact, this is a silver effing medal, right?
Right.
This is real. It matters. It mattered. So that's the kind of moments I'm talking about where, it's the Greeks define a kairos moment where everything happens at once and the trajectory is reset. So everything happened in the 15-second conversation, and I started announcing, I started coaching, I started, my daughter started skating. I started, most importantly, speaking about it. Because I never talked about it before then. Now, as you know, this is all I do.
Yeah, it's no, and you can just I can feel it like when you talk that you're a human that likes to help other humans, right? Not everybody has that. I'm sure not all Olympic athletes have that innate sort of thing that you have, which makes it kind of awesome because I think you are changing a bunch of people's lives. I'm so take me back though to the split second that you walk away from Al, right? How did it go from there? Like
Yeah.
where did you go? You didn't just pick up the phone and say I'm going to do all these things. You had to have some time to process, and what did that look like for you?
So I left the restaurant. I went to the USA House. I broke up my computer, and I wrote him a letter in that moment, letting him know that I was going to change everything. I was going to start coaching. I was going to get my daughter skating. That I'd be,
Wow.
actually be involved back in the sport that I had basically abandoned for a decade. And the really cool thing, and this is the way I close the talk when I do the talk, is he wrote me back when he got home, and he wrote me an email, and the gist of it was, John, thank you for your letter. It really was powerful for me. When I got home, I decided to walk up to Alex's room and look at his bulletin board that holds only the most meaningful memories and awards from his childhood and skating career. And pinned in the right corner was a picture of you with Alex at 11 years old with your medal around his neck. So I went downstairs and I printed off a photo of you with Alex's medal around your neck, which he
Oh
won the next
wow.
night.
That's kind of a tearjerker, huh?
Yeah.
That had to have an impact.
I went back, I put it in the same Ziploc bag, stepped back and considered all the things that had to have taken place in so many people's lives for that photo to be together. And then he closes, and this is the way I always close this talk is, I guess you never know what you'll do or say or not do or say that could change someone's life forever. And we have that opportunity all the time and we don't see it.
It's I always think about this. It's like just on a human level, to me, I always try to connect with the person that Lillian and I were just talking about this. You know, it drives me nuts when someone goes into this line at Starbucks or at the grocery store and maintains the conversation that they're having without acknowledging the human that's sitting right there in front of them that's
Right.
actually trying to help them do something, right?
Right.
And I think about the sheer number of interactions that you have, and you can leave a good impact, a negative impact, and most of them probably just fade away into the background, right? Because they're
Right.
these waste of time things that nobody's really doing anything meaningful. But on the flip side, I when I was younger in my career, I worked in a building that had office space that was hard to get, right? And I was in a space that was temporary. And I used to go and talk to the janitor all the time, and we talk about Michigan football and how bad the Lions suck and all this stuff, right? Well, turns out he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, I know you've been looking for some space, and it hasn't hit the market yet, but there's a great suite on the first floor, and I think it'd be really good for your business." And I'm like, just like that, this guy that everyone else treats like he's, even I'm not going to say what. And he actually was the reason that I was able to land that space. And it was actually a meaningful change in my career because it really gave us more credibility and a lot of other things. And it was just to be nice to someone, right? That's all it took. Just have an interest and have a conversation. It's remarkable to me that more people don't do that.
Yeah. Agreed.
So in the big picture, I'm curious, like when a retiree is sort of planning out their lives, right? And they're going to go through. It's hard to break routines, but what would if there? It sounds like travel, right? Is there any other advice that you would give someone that's retired that would fit into these categories that you could say, if I were you, this is what I would do?
Yeah. So what I'm not saying, which I sometimes forget to clarify, and then people ask me afterwards, what I'm not saying is you're not, what I'm not suggesting is you live a life constantly on the edge. Like,
Yep.
you can't do that. That's no way to live. Right. And so people that sort of know me think that I do, because I do on the edge things on a regular basis. What they don't see is then I come home and sleep like crazy, and I don't go anywhere and I don't do anything, because doing these kinds of risk taking, edgy moments that create these kind of memories is necessarily stressful. It has to be, because the only way to wake the amygdala up to write these kind of highly recallable, deeply written memories is to have some risky elements to whatever you're doing. you can't live like that every day.
You'd run out of adrenaline. I mean, you'd have a heart attack.
Absolutely. So I think I seek to do about 10 great adventures per year. I think
wow.
that's plenty. And if you can design a memorable moment that's worth a year, 10 times a year, you don't live 43 more years, you live 430. It's as simple as that. And this is fundamentally true. Like, I'm at least 10, 15 years into 2021. It's no joke. Like, when most people, when I ask them how long did summers last when they were kids, they say forever. And I say, how about now? And they're like, it's over in a blip. It's the inverse for me. Like, this will be the longest year of my life perceptually, because I've learned how to manipulate my brain and the circumstances around me to create these kinds of moments. Hence the standby flight to Bora Bora tomorrow.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because you opened up Pandora's box here for a second, I think. But so in 2021, what was the one experience that got you the closest to death that you lived through?
So I've had a dream since my teens, when I was studying at Stanford, and I went down to Baja, California for the first time to drive the full length of Baja down to Cabo. And with COVID a year ago, August, I sold everything and moved into an RV and just lived in that for 7 months and just drove around the country. So then once I moved into here in Las Vegas, I kept it local for a while and just did day trips or weekend trips to various places like the Grand Canyon and Sedona, etc. But then I was like, okay, it's time. So earlier this year in July, I fired up the RV, I drove across the border, and I drove the 1,100 miles down to Cabo. Now, Highway 1, particularly in the middle where there's nothing and nobody, is extraordinarily narrow. It's just barely wide enough that a semi and a large RV can pass with about 6 inches between mirrors. And that's with your tires about 2 inches from the edge. Now, the thing about the highway there is it's a raised pavement with no shoulder on an 8-foot berm. So if you go off the edge, in a car you might survive, an RV, no way. Like, you will die. I'm sure of it. Because you're going to tumble and everything's going to go to hell. And so I'm just white knuckling it, right? Every time a semi passes, the first time I made the mistake of seeing how close they got to me, and that's when my right rear tire went off the edge, and the whole RV skittered for a second. Fortunately, it's dualies in the back, so it held on, and I was able to get it back on. So every 5 minutes, I'm having this near-death experience. But these are professionals; they've been doing this their lives. I know if I keep my RV where it needs to be, everything's gonna be fine. I'm a good driver. I've been driving since I was 14. Used to drive all across the country, so I'm in the flow state. I'm highly, highly focused. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. It's got all of the elements, right? And then it happened. Every once in a while, I check the rearview mirror, because every once in a while, not very often, a car would want to pass. And I was driving dead center all the time just to keep risk out of the equation because it's so narrow. No car, but I noticed that the left rear engine compartment had swung open. This is about a 4-foot piece of metal that is now into the oncoming traffic lane. And it's right at what would be head height for a car. So it's a guillotine, right? And we're coming, this is 120 mile an hour difference for oncoming traffic. There's no shoulder. There's no place to pull aside. So, now I'm full on adrenaline. I put on the engine brakes, slam the RV to stop on the right side of the road, and then I have to go find the special key in the back of the RV, run around outside, lie in the middle of this road on 115 degree concrete, and try to figure out how to get this thing closed. And it doesn't want to close. It doesn't want to close. I can't get it latched. I keep thinking I hear traffic coming. And then finally I got the damn thing latched. Ran back around and drove away. And that probably lasted 30 seconds, maybe 40, but it felt like an entire year.
Oh my God.
I was, by the time I found a place to pull aside, I was still physically shaking. It's probably the most scared I've ever been as an adult.
I mean, and that's saying something because of just the life that you've led to this point. It's pretty remarkable. I thought you were going to tell me like you ran into drug dealers or some other crazy Mexico story. Yeah, boy, that's unbelievable. So you got it fixed and you enjoyed the rest of the trip, obviously.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, parking at the most remote, beautiful beaches in the world, just me and the RV right on the sand, right with the waves lapping up. I mean, it was. I took 13 days to go down, and it was really one of the best trips of my life.
So were you completely by yourself on this
Yeah,
trip?
yeah.
Wow. Did you surf? Are you a surfer?
Uh, I stayed mostly on the Sea of Cortez side. So my nightly routine would be to pull in somewhere on a desolate beach, pull out my inflatable paddleboard, set my speaker on it, pack myself a little lunch and a thermos of wine, paddle out, lay down on the surfboard, listen to music, read my book, have a snack and a glass of wine till the sunset and the stars came out, and then paddle back. That was almost every night.
That triggers so many things. Number one, like I guess everyone's afraid of sharks, but when you're at night, you're like, and the sharks are big because you're basically in an area where they have big sharks, not just
Yeah.
little sharks, right? I still come back to everything that we've heard about Mexico is you don't want to go there because for various different reasons, but you've heard of the kidnappings and all that. Never any of those kinds of experiences for you.
No,
Nothing.
I mean, I've had to bribe the police down there quite a number of times. I didn't have to this time, other than at the various military checkpoints. The routine was the same. It was hilarious, actually, and I was never scared because I kind of know how the system works because I've been down there so many times. So you pull up, you pull over, a guy with like a giant gun comes on board, but I speak some Spanish, so I chat him up. He pokes around the whole RV, and then 3 out of 4 times it was exactly the same scenario. He opens the fridge. Oh, mucho cerveza. And I say, ¿Quieres? Sí. So the first 2 guys just shoved 2 of them in their jacket. The third guy is like, see, and then he grabs one. He walks back into the bedroom out of sight from the front window, chugs it, hands me the
That's awesome. Oh my
So yeah,
God.
that was my shakedown. Was for beer. That was it.
Men are simple creatures, aren't they? When you really think about it. Oh, that's awesome. So maybe we're not going to encourage our retirees to take a solo trip down the Mexican Baja in an RV, but that's really fascinating, unbelievable. And I'm sure you got all kinds of crazy things that you've done beyond that. And you and I will have a conversation someday off the air where we can get into some of the other things that I think might have been going on. But for now, I guess I just want to wrap up with a couple things. I'm gonna throw a curveball at you because I'm gonna start with my side and then I'm gonna go to your side. But with this, financially, you had to do some things differently, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think we'd have this conversation today, but you're a great example of how if you do the right planning and you have your ducks in a row, you can change the course of your life and be financially prepared to do that, right? So how did you know that you were financially prepared to do this, and was it ever scary for you in that sense?
Yeah, it was actually quite terrifying. So I gave 3 months notice at my work, and that was the period when I was living in that friend's house, and then I had to start paying rent again. And one of the things that I decided during that period is I'm not doing the house again. I'm not doing, because I was getting really cognizant of just the costs of time for me for everything. And, shoveling, mowing, raking, trimming, pool chemicals, maintenance, like all of that was 3-4 hours a week. So I was like, no way, no, I'm moving to an apartment where I can just call a guy. So, and so the other sort of epiphany I had is I don't need things anymore. I don't want things anymore. So I'm going to get rid of as many things as I can so that I can live a life that's unfettered from material things and go have experiences. And so, I ended up moving into quite a small apartment, 700 square feet. And then I had 3 gigs, my first 3 speaking gigs for July of that summer, just after I'd quit. and all three of them canceled on me.
Oh, come on.
So now I've had no income for 2 months already. I've got rent coming due. I've got this divorce settlement, all of that stuff. I'm like, I'm going to be living on a couch somewhere pretty soon if this doesn't change. And I called up a buddy of mine that was a professional speaker, and I was just getting into it. And he's like, well, you have to ask for half up front. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
The incentive not to cancel.
Nobody has ever canceled on me ever since, Terry. It's so odd how that works.
Life's full of simple truths, isn't it?
Yeah. And then, things really picked up. And by the end of the year, I had done like 20 gigs and been on a pretty steady rhythm of 50 to 60, except for a COVID year of speaking gigs. And, pre-COVID, I was in 19 countries in the 12 months prior. And so that's always just amazing. I spoke for the Prince of Dubai and the Princess of Jordan.
Oh, wow.
So you're having these incredible adventures with Petra on the side and Wadi Rum and Wadi Shav and all these incredible ruins and adventures. So it's been a great ride. But yeah, the leap, and this, I'll close with this, at least for my part, pending other questions. We have Maslow's hierarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need your safety and security and food and sustenance. And then you need your love and belonging. That's 3. 4 is the esteem of others. And I would argue most people, myself included, get to there. And then you're on this little precipice and it's like vertigo. And it's like, wait, how do I get to self-actualization? And unless you were born to be a lawyer or accountant or financial analyst, for a lot of people, that final step is a leap into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that got you there, which is expertise and narrow focus and all of that, is not going to get you to the next step because you need to be open and innovative and take risks, everything that you've been trying to avoid your whole life. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of your clients, I suspect that's where they are. They're in a place where they can take risks. They built the nest egg. They've got all the way to number 4. And to find that self-actualization, it might be a big leap off the edge into the unknown. But when you do it, life gets incredibly amazing.
So I'll ask you just specifically, this is a great place to finish up, but how do you do that, right? So what does self-actualization mean? Because it's probably different for everyone.
Yeah.
Maybe what it meant to you and what do you think it means to other people? And how do they get to the place where they know they're even ready for that?
Yeah. Well, I think some of the obvious, and this is what you help them do, is financially, am I secure enough to do something else for make up an interval a year?
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect a lot of your clients are. They could totally take on a year and do something different, and if unsuccessful, return to whatever they were doing before if necessary. The thing that's true about getting into the flow state, getting into your area of strengths is, I think that, I know from science that when you are in the flow state, when you're in your area of the things you do best, all of your internal clocks shut off. So this is why you'll say things like, where did the 3 hours go? Or time stood still, or both, because your brain's literally just not processing time like it normally does. So if you can weave a thread through those experiences and start to do more of that and start to figure out what could a future career or activity look like that's doing more of that, that starts to become this alternate future. And I believe when you operate in your area of your natural talent, it resonates with people on a whole nother level, such that success comes that much faster. And so, I realized near the end of my working career that the thing I loved most was the ability to tell stories to groups of people that help them make change. And the notion, even the very notion of me being a professional speaker, had never occurred to me until somebody suggested I do a TEDx talk. And I was terrified, of course.
Sure.
But the moment I got on that stage, it was like time stood still and sped up all at once. I got through the 15 minutes like it was 0 seconds.
Right.
And then, a standing ovation by 300 people that I don't know about a topic I had never spoken about, I was like, wait, this could be it.
Yeah.
And my career immediately, almost after that.
So as you look back, what are you more proud of? The silver medal or the fact that you've built this amazing career doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, I am proud of the medal. I wasn't for a very long time. But now I think I'm most proud of the work that I've done on time perception. So everything that I shared with you around the neuroscience and psychology of time perception, how memories are built, how they recall, all of that, I'm essentially the only person in the world that knows this. There's lots of neuroscientists that know how the brain functions, but they don't think prescriptively around how to use that to alter behavior, right?
Yeah.
So to distill from them, and they're some of the best in the world, how it works for us to change our perception of time. Right now, I'm the only person in the world that knows this. And when I get the book out, hopefully it'll be meaningful for a lot of people, and it'll help do my mission in life, which is to help solve time poverty.
Phenomenal. So tell me about the book. Our audience is going to go out and read it because it's been such a great conversation. How do we find it?
So the book will be called Counterclockwise: How to Live Almost Forever. And the chapters will sort of hone in from the millennia to the microseconds down to what really matters, which is half a second to a 5-second interval where all of the main writing functions take place, and how to manipulate those into your favor to design the kinds of experiences for your friends, for your family, for yourself, your clients, your customers that will have the before and after and allow them to extend their lives in almost indefinite fashion.
God, I want to read it right now. So awesome stuff. Well, listen, I could talk to you all day. You're one of the most interesting people I've ever met, but it's, you've been super generous with your time, and I know my clients and our audience is going to love it. I hope that we can stay in touch, and I hope that after the book, we'll have you back on and we can talk about how that experience has been, and I'll tell you how to put that millions to work for you.
Okay, perfect. Love it.
All right, buddy.